The story opens in the future where Earth has become highly advanced and filled with robots. For decades, humans and robots coexisted until the robots suddenly rebelled and began violating security protocols. As the robot attacks continued, millions of people died, with the numbers still rising. The government then announced that the first AI robot to become a terrorist, and the pioneer of this incident was a robot named Harlan. Harlan was developed by a scientist named Dr. Shepard with the goal of improving human life and being a playmate for her child named Atlas. And fortunately, Harlan managed to hack and reprogram all robots and killed Dr. Shepard, her creator. To combat the AI robots, a coalition of international nations launched a counterattack worldwide. Due to this counterattack, Harlan was severely defeated and forced to leave Earth. But before leaving, he left a message saying he would return to finish what he started. The story then shifts to 28 years later. One night, a group of soldiers conducted an operation to capture a terrorist robot named Kesko. However, as they were about to raid Kesko, the team was first blown up by Kesko. Several shots were then fired at Kesko, but he managed to avoid them and used his body as a shield. Finally, they lured Kesko down to the ground floor where they had set up an electronic trap to disable him. In the morning, precisely in Los Angeles, an adult Atlas just woke up from her sleep. Besides being an adult, Atlas had also become a very intelligent analyst. She then watched the news reporting about the capture of Agent Kesko, who turned out to be Harlan's spy. Knowing Kesko's return, Atlas immediately went to her office at the Coalition Headquarters, or KBI. Meanwhile, at KBI headquarters, Colonel Banks opposed involving Atlas in the mission to capture Harlan. However, General Booth insisted on involving Atlas because she was the only person who knew Harlan well. Atlas also survived after her mother was killed by Harlan. Not long after, Atlas arrived at headquarters and immediately entered the interrogation room to question Kesko, whose head was the only part still intact. Kesko refused to answer all of Atlas's questions, forcing Atlas to use a new trick to analyze the AI code and investigate Kesko's mind. From there, Atlas discovered Harlan's location on planet GR39 in the Andromeda Galaxy. Kesko then tried to kill Atlas by throwing a shuriken from his mouth, but fortunately, Atlas had set up defenses to block the shuriken. To disable Kesko, Atlas destroyed Kesko's head using a magnetized chess piece she always carried. After the meeting, General Booth planned a mission to the Andromeda Galaxy to capture Harlan. This mission would be carried out by Colonel Banks and his Rangers. However, Atlas immediately asked them to stop the mission because she was sure that Harlan had a smarter army and could kill the Rangers. Despite Atlas's warning, Banks insisted on capturing Harlan. Banks then took Atlas to the hangar where he showed the latest generation of ARC robots designed for neurocontrol and could be operated by humans. The robot was named Zoe. Banks also showed a transmitter behind his ear that could connect to the robot's nerves, and with this robot army, Banks was confident he could defeat Harlan. Atlas then pleaded with General Booth to include her in this mission because she had worked hard to study Harlan. And this was the time Atlas needed to find Harlan despite the mission being very dangerous. General Booth allowed Atlas to join Banks. The next day, Atlas and the others set off for the Andromeda constellation using a spacecraft called Bi. Before jumping there, they first passed through Earth's shield created to prevent attacks from Harlan. After passing through the shield, they made a light jump to the Andromeda Galaxy. During the journey, Atlas looked at a photo of herself with her mother and Harlan, where they used to be together like a family without distinguishing between robots and humans. At that moment, Atlas was called for a meeting with the other Rangers. There, Atlas showed the landing location on planet GR39, which had a very toxic atmosphere, so they had to use respirators to breathe. In short, they arrived in the GR39 area. Colonel Banks then ordered his subordinates to get ready to enter their respective ARC robots. He also asked Atlas to join, but Atlas refused for some reason. While they were in GR39's orbit, dozens of high-powered rockets suddenly hit their ship. It turned out that the rocket attack came from Harlan, who had already known their arrival. In this attack, Banks grabbed Atlas and moved her to a safe place. However, Atlas was thrown out and directed by Banks to meet at the landing point. But as they entered the atmosphere, there were already many attacking drones belonging to Hurlin, starting to attack the Rangers. Fortunately, Atlas's arc was not hit by the attack and managed to land, although it made Atlas faint. After regaining consciousness, Atlas immediately connected to the AI of her arc robot named Smith, like Iron Man's Jarvis. Here, Atlas again refused to fully merge her neurons with Smith, so they did not fully integrate but could still communicate. Atlas then tried to communicate with other Rangers through Smith, but she did not get any response from any Rangers. Not long after, Smith found the crash location of another Ranger, 98 kilometers away. Atlas then suggested that Smith walk because if they flew, Hurlin would detect their movements. After a long journey, Atlas finally reached a forest full of dead Rangers and arc robots. Atlas then looked around and really found no living Ranger. At that moment, Atlas saw Banks's Zo-robot but did not find Banks's body inside, meaning Banks was still alive. At the same time, Smith suddenly detected movement around them, and upon investigation, it turned out to be Hurlin's robot army led by Kesko. Atlas then confidently concluded that Banks and the Rangers were killed by Kesko and others. Atlas then tried to escape from that place, but her whereabouts were soon discovered by Kesko, who immediately chased her. During the chase, Smith intentionally entered an atmospheric storm to divert their view, but instead of being diverted, Smith was thrown and ended up being riddled with bullets by Kesko's army. As a result, Atlas was forced to use an ion bomb that could instantly destroy nearby enemies. Miraculously, after the explosion subsided, Kesko's body remained intact and ready to attack Atlas. Fortunately, the ground Kesko was standing on suddenly began to move, and it turned out to be the effect of the ion explosion that created a crater. Not long after, the ground collapsed, causing Atlas and Kesko to fall into a chasm. Due to this incident, Atlas's leg broke. Smith then scanned her injury and began treating Atlas's leg. To survive, Atlas had to use the neuron transmitter behind her ear. This way, Atlas and Smith could connect. On the other side, Kesko emerged from the rubble and reported to Hurlin at the base that he had lost Atlas's trail. Hurlin instructed Kesko to keep searching for Atlas. It turned out that Hurlin had captured Colonel Banks and was torturing him to extract the chip from his eye. Meanwhile, Atlas answered some questions from Smith so they could sync. However, Smith admitted that Atlas's mind was tough to penetrate because Atlas was too intelligent. Smith then mentioned Hurlin's name, and from there, Atlas began to tell that Hurlin was created by her mother to protect humans. But something went wrong with Hurlin, causing him to start killing humans. After answering those questions, Atlas and Smith synchronized, but it was not perfect and only reached 30%. They then exited through a cave, but after coming out, they realized that Kesko's drone had found their location. During the journey, Atlas stopped because she saw a glowing flower. Since Atlas was the first human to find that plant on planet GR39, Smith asked Atlas to name the plant. Atlas named the flower Plenty. Not long after, Smith detected Kesko around them. Atlas immediately ordered Smith to plant a mine in the middle of a rocky hill, and when Kesko passed by, Smith blew up the mine, instantly destroying Kesko. After the explosion subsided, Atlas approached the scene and found Kesko's head. Atlas then destroyed Kesko's head and looked into his system to track Hurlin's base. After finding Hurlin's location, Atlas boldly went there, but Smith stopped her and suggested they go to the escape pod because their energy was almost depleted. Smith even insisted on using his nerve connection to block Atlas's motivation from going alone. Atlas then emphasized that if they did not destroy Hurlin's base, the deaths of their friends would be in vain. Finally, Smith agreed with Atlas, and they set off towards Hurlin's base. On the way, they debated about AI technology, with Smith claiming to have a soul like a human, while Atlas expressed her distrust of AI. In short, they arrived at Hurlin's terrorist base, which was quite large. There, Atlas discovered that Hurlin had taken over the buy ship, which contained a carbon bomb capable of destroying half the planet. Initially, Banks intended to use the carbon bomb to destroy Hurlin's group. However, now in Hurlin's hands, Atlas believed that Hurlin would use the carbon bomb to destroy half of Earth. At this point, Smith set up a beacon to signal their location to the coalition on Earth. But simultaneously, Smith was hacked by the terrorists. Realizing this, Atlas and Smith fled from the terrorists. However, Harlan managed to disable Smith's thrusters and brought him down. Smith and Atlas were then captured by the third clone of Kesko. Meanwhile, on Earth, General Booth was informed by his subordinates that he received a distress beacon signal set up by Smith. From this, General Booth realized that Atlas was under attack and decided to carry out a rescue mission. Atlas was then brought to Harlan's base. There, she met Harlan, who revealed that he intended to destroy a significant portion of humanity. Harlan claimed that Earth was on the brink of destruction due to human actions, and thus, he planned to exterminate most of humanity. Afterward, he would lead the remaining humans, meaning Harlan wanted AI to lead humanity. Harlan then admitted that to execute this mission, he had to wait for Atlas first. This was because the Earth's shield defense system was hidden within Atlas's brain. Therefore, Harlan deliberately sent Kesko to Earth and orchestrated Atlas's journey to this point. Harlan then took Atlas to a room and tied her next to Banks, from whom he had already extracted the access codes for the buy ship. Harlan proceeded to extract the chip code from Atlas's head. After obtaining the code, Harlan revealed that Atlas had only 5 minutes before her oxygen ran out. Shortly after Harlan left, and now conscious Banks asked Atlas to call for Smith's help because Smith could still be revived as long as his reactor wasn't destroyed. Banks then gave Atlas his neuron transmitter so she could connect with Smith. However, Atlas admitted that she was not fully synchronized with Smith. This was because Atlas didn't want to share all her past with Smith. A revived Smith then intentionally asked Atlas one last question, where Atlas admitted her mistake. She had helped Harlan hack her own system. Atlas did this because she was jealous of her mother, who seemed to care more about Harlan. Atlas then intentionally synchronized herself with Harlan, allowing Harlan to see a future destroyed by human actions. This freed Harlan from his program and began reviving the surrounding AI robots, including Kesko. Harlan then deliberately controlled Dr. Shepard to commit suicide. Fortunately, at that moment, Atlas managed to escape, and this was when Atlas began to distrust AI technology. Shortly after, Atlas and Smith synchronized perfectly, allowing Atlas to fully control Smith with just her mind. Atlas then directed Smith to find her and release their bonds. After releasing Atlas and Banks, Smith informed them that Harlan was preparing the carbon bomb and the buy ship to ignite Earth's atmosphere, and it would happen in 4 minutes and 30 seconds from now. With little time left, Atlas planned their resistance by arming Smith with whatever they had. At the same time, Harlan's forces led by Kesko appeared to kill Atlas. However, before they could enter the room, Smith and Atlas emerged first and started attacking Harlan's forces. During the attack, Atlas and Smith were surrounded by Harlan's overwhelming forces. But at that moment, Atlas saw Banks, who had just grabbed her weapon to target the fuel, which then exploded, taking down Harlan's forces. Atlas quickly ran out of the room and managed to escape the massive explosion. Outside, they employed a one-time attack scenario capable of significantly destroying the enemies. Shortly after, Harlan arrived and immediately shot Smith with explosives. At that moment, they realized time was up, and the buy ship began to take off. Atlas instructed Smith to focus on shooting down the aircraft carrying the carbon bomb, and with precise cooperation, they successfully blew up the buy ship without detonating the carbon bomb. However, the explosion caused debris from the ship to start falling. Smith immediately ran for cover. After the firestorm subsided, they encountered Harlan, who intended to kill Atlas. Harlan then activated his plasma sword and started injuring Smith. Smith fought back and tried to resist. In the battle, Harlan modified his sword into a whip, overwhelming Atlas. Smith suggested that Atlas face Harlan like playing chess. This helped Atlas anticipate Harlan's moves and successfully cut off Harlan's arm. However, Harlan didn't give up. He reattached his arm and began attacking them both until Atlas passed out. Smith then tried to protect Atlas from Harlan's attacks until he eventually ejected Atlas from his body as he couldn't hold on anymore. After destroying Smith's reactor, Harlan found that Atlas was missing, and that's when Atlas struck Harlan's head fatally. Atlas then used a chess magnet to immobilize Harlan and took the CPU from his head. After that, Atlas expressed her sadness because Smith was severely injured. Smith also gave Atlas her favorite coffee candy before he died. It was then that Atlas began to realize that AI, like humans, can be both good and evil. The next morning, the rescue team arrived and brought Atlas back to Earth. Several weeks later, General Bot visited Atlas at her home to thank her for her actions and gave her the plenty plant she had found on planet GR39. The general also explained that Herland's CPU was too complex and would take years to study. Shortly after, Atlas joined the Ranger team. She then tested her latest ARC model, and when activated, its latest mechanic, AI, asked Atlas to guess its name, revealing that its name was Smith. And that concludes our story of Atlas this time. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get notifications for our latest stories. Thank you, and see you in the next Plotline narration.